It's wonderful to be here. And China, just a small little topic then. If you haven't been to China, and quite a few people that I've met here so far in the last few days haven't, and actually, even if you have been to China, it's such a huge country with so many different provinces, dialects, tier cities, such overwhelming statistics. It can be quite difficult to get. Even if you think you've got it, it changes so fast, especially right now, at the moment, when it comes to technology and generations and trade issues. In the last few days, we've heard about the rising affluence, growing middle class, aging population. And there are a number of health initiatives coming from the top too. All this means that the country offers up an incredible opportunity for all of you in the wellness market. Here to make sense of it all are 5 experts spanning different yet overlapping industries. Now, we already know quite a few of you. Of course, David Udell needs no introduction, Group President APAC for Hyatt. Mei Zhang, founder of WildChina, extraordinary travel tours and experiences in China and overseas. The Leader in Innovation Award winner, Ronna Chao, chairman of Novetex Textiles. And we also have health and media investor and philanthropist Victor Koo, chairman. You have some fans. He's the chairman of Heyi Holdings, who started China's first YouTube, Youku. And in fact, that was more of a mix of Netflix and YouTube, which eventually merged with Alibaba Entertainment in 2016. And he now focuses on the convergence of health, wellness, and technology. And we also have branding and marketing expert Jenny Lo. She's CatchOn's general manager in China and based in Shanghai, is that right? Yeah. And she is a wealth of information on anything and everything about the China market. Let's jump straight in. And my first question to any of you, all of you, what are the biggest myths about China and the Chinese market? And what are the actual realities behind them? Anybody going to jump in?
I'll start, because we're talking about health and wellness. Because a lot of people look at China as the second largest market in the world, but in terms of health, it's actually very much a child, because the per capita spending in terms of health is only 7%. So the amount of spending within health and wellness in China is very low, but it's actually growing very, very rapidly. So the myth is that sometimes when we look at China, it seems like such a huge market. But what we're seeing in the next 20, 30 years from a health standpoint is the rapid growth of about 18% compound annual growth rate that will actually become eventually the second largest health market in the world. So the market size, I think a lot of people get confused.
Thank you.
I'll jump in there in case you guys have the same points. I'll cover it first. I think the myth about the China market is taking China as one market. It's absolutely not. There are so many layers of it. One night of my hotel stay here at the Grand Hyatt is my dad's entire trip. Coming from a tourism perspective, travel for wellness, in my case, would be looking for spa or spiritual moments in the shrine or, you know, at the mountaintop after a hike and sort of self-realization. To my dad, it's saving money, saving the cost. So, but we are both Chinese markets, and there are multiple other layers, the Gen Z and Gen Y. I think that is one big myth.
Right.
So somebody once said to me, in China, nothing is allowed, but everything is possible. So that's pretty much sum up, the way that guide us to understand China. So China, obviously, as Mei and Victor said, it is one massive market, but at the same time, very, very diverse. And it is also very, very fast moving as well. So the one-size-fits-all approach obviously doesn't quite work. And we also see that there's a lot of cliche way of understanding Chinese as well. I guess one of the classic examples that most of you have probably heard about is D&G last year. They put out an advertising, thought it was quite funny, depicting Chinese using chopsticks to eat spaghetti. So of course it's backlash and then got boycott in China, fashion show got cancelled, etc., etc. But that's also a very classic example to, to illustrate that there's a lot of cultural nuances, and also there's no one-size-fits-all approach. What works like 20 years ago doesn't mean that it works now.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that's been said, but I do want to disagree with one thing that Catherine said at the beginning, is that certainly for me, I'm not an expert by any means about China. It's something that is incredibly fast-moving and changing, and I think it's certainly, I'm a student of everything that's going on there, because if you compare to today, compared to 5 years ago, it's like a totally different scene, and things are moving and changing quickly. I think one of the big sort of myths or kind of fallacies is that the Chinese, when they travel, they're looking for Chinese things, and really that's I think we missed the boat with that. Because there was a time when hotels would put, you needed to have dim sum on the menu in the morning, and you needed to have tea, and you needed to have all of these things that are very common in China. But in fact, the great thing and where the exciting opportunity is they want to have experiences, and they want them to be real experiences, authentic experiences, and it's not about about stuff anymore. It's about experiences and making it real. And I think that's great upside for all of us, because we're all about trying to connect what we're doing in a meaningful way. So there's a very, very 300 million people out there that are middle class. Only 30% of them have passports. So if you think about the potential of that 1.4 billion people, it's huge.
My comment is very much in line with what has already been shared. I think there's an assumption, general assumption, that because China as a modern nation is young, we just celebrated our 70th birthday, so there's an assumption of Chinese people, travelers, customers being not sophisticated. So we don't need to give them the top of the line stuff. It shocks me every time I go to Shanghai. I don't go very often, but every time I go, I am reminded of the first time I ever went in the 80s. It's not that long ago, and how much has changed. I sat in the Starbucks roastery, and I thought, this cannot be China. I grew up in Hong Kong. I lived in the States for half of my life, and I think we don't even have this in Hong Kong. So there's an assumption that the sophistication level is not up there, but it really is. Like you mentioned, there are different markets, there are different tiers of customers. So whoever's trying to get into that Chinese market needs to understand the landscape.
Absolutely. And going back to something that May said yesterday to me, the different tiers of Chinese travelers in terms of outbound market. You mentioned something about the Eiffel Tower, which I'd love you to tell everybody today. But it just shows that there's different amounts of experience out there. So there are still so many people who don't have passports and for whom traveling will be a first-time experience in the next few years. But then you work with a very travel-savvy group, I think.
We were talking about whether Chinese travelers were already looking for experiences or landmarks. And I did comment on something like whatever you read in the news, what hitting the news is maybe the scribble at Luxor in Egypt, and that is Chinese travelers. But there's a completely different segment of Chinese travelers who has matured in very short period of time from taking a selfie, I've been here, done that kind of era, to completely, they're looking for the same thing. They're looking to put away their phone. They're looking to find tranquility among themselves. And when you look at travel destinations in China, a very famous destination is Lijiang. It has 40 million travelers a year. And so I asked some of our Chinese travelers, what do you think of Lijiang? They're like, oh my God, I cannot post a picture of me visiting Lijiang or in front of the Eiffel Towers. Because that, to them, is lowering their taste in travel. So you do see this broad spectrum of travelers, and a huge number, fast-growing number, are looking for experiences in remote corners of the world already.
And this is obviously a trend that we recognize from the West. So are there any major different... Sorry? Oh, yes, sorry. Go ahead.
I think a lot of what May said is also driven by technology. Because of technology, most people, at least the urban population, there are over 700 million people that are on the internet. And then on the mobile phone, basically they can access the best information about anywhere in the world. So whether they travel to Paris, they're no longer just looking for the Eiffel Tower experience. They can actually access, and a lot of them plan their purchases. So one way to think about it is China used to be kind of a get-rich country. Now it's in a phase where it's between get-rich and live-rich. And with the live-rich, we're talking about being more health-conscious, want to travel more, and want to learn and educate more. So that's kind of the phase. And it's almost like bipolar Chinese consumers, which are actually looking for very, very different things.
Yeah. I just wanted to add something that you both talked about mobile, which that's really a critical thing, because in China, basically, we live our life off of this. Everything comes off of this. The ecosystem is totally in one's telephone. And that's really an important thing, because we're, in the West, we're very concerned about intermediaries, about those people or those things that are coming between us and our customer. But I think for any of us that are dealing in China today and tomorrow, it's really about how to become a part of this ecosystem in the most effective way possible. It's like Victor was saying yesterday, that when he travels, he doesn't bring any money. He doesn't have to, when he travels in China, because he has WeChat Pay and Alipay. All the payment systems are embedded in the phone. So, and if you think about it, like when I go back to the States, and if I pay my electric bill, I write a check. That's like, writing a check is like, in China, is like, where did you come from? Which planet did you come from? So it's really different. So the point is, for all of us, we need to think about how to embed ourselves into the Chinese ecosystem, mobile, digital first. That's critical.
Yeah, indeed. One of the biggest complaints, so to speak, that travelers have is with their payment when they go overseas. Even when they book hotels, they can't just use WeChat, QR code, everything done. They have to produce a credit card. And not to forget, the percentage of population owning a credit card in China is less than 20%. So by not having that payment, one-stop shop payment transaction system, we're also creating a lot of trouble to the consumer and also losing a lot of opportunities as well.
Absolutely. And when you look at how connected everybody is in China, I wonder if you've got any advice for people who would like to go into China and to sell their products or their services. How do they compete with Chinese products that understand the mobile platform so brilliantly already?
I would just say that, because Hyatt, we have to challenge ourselves, because we have 80 hotels in China, and our thinking always was that we have to win the hearts and minds of the Chinese in China first, because if we do that, if they love our brands, then when they travel outside, they will most likely or hopefully stay with us. But it's so important that engagement with them, the journey from dream to booking to whatever has no friction in it, and to the point that we're asking for credit cards and things like that. People have, yourself, if you're Googling something and all of a sudden you encounter, something that slows you down, you go off and Google something else. So I think the most important thing is we have to, in China for China. And there's inherent risk in that, because there's all these concerns about data privacy, there's concerns about cybersecurity and more and more. But truly, I think if we're going to be successful, we have to be willing to take calculated risks, and we have to forge relationships with partners or different partners that can help us be successful and move forward, particularly in the digital area.
I think we have a lot to learn from luxury brands when it comes to digital connection in China. So one of the best example would be Burberry, how they use the different social media channels in China to create a 360-degree experience. So you can go on their WeChat, type in your name, and then they will make like a virtual name tag for you. The classic name tag has your name on it. And then you can watch their fashion shows online. You can buy, of course. So they have many, many different ways to integrate themselves with digital and also connect with the audience, which in China, millennial becomes like a very big part of their market as well. So this is one of the very good example to show us that how digital is important in China.
We also work with a lot of luxury brands at Youku. It's like if you deal with LVMH, for example, they're saying that in China they had to move on mobile and digital much earlier than other countries, because unlike a lot of developed countries, which has old money, and new money, in China it's like new money, new money, there's no old money. And so it's really all the young people, and all the young people are all on mobile internet. And the other thing related to that is the mobile internet ecosystem is highly entrepreneurial, but is also very, very different to what is in US and Europe, for example. So you have equivalent or similar companies within the China internet ecosystem that are very, very strong domestic, local-based companies that are very, very quick moving. Plus, actually, the products themselves in China, at least at the applications front, is already very, very advanced. So what you actually be able to find when you're applying or promoting your products and services within China, there are actually more things that you can do in the mobile internet that you probably can't do on Facebook or Twitter. So you need to have very local team that understands all the differences in terms of the mobile internet ecosystem in China, so you can actually capitalize on those opportunities. So you can't just use your best practices overseas and bring it to China. Certainly not on mobile internet.
I want to just point out a slightly different angle in travel business, because most travel providers are small businesses, family-owned businesses. They don't have the kind of budget the fashion houses would have, and have a localized team to generate social media content and all that. So one of the best ways is working through the Chinese partners, whether these are the Chinese travel designers, etc. But my advice for any providers, wellness experience providers or operators overseas who want to tap the Chinese market, two things besides having a Chinese partner. One is excel in what you do best. Don't spend way too much time thinking about catering to Chinese market. If you're really good at the outback camping in Australia, do that. Just insist on your characteristic experiences and be really good at that, and work with your partners to communicate that excellence to the market. Less tailoring for the high-end market. Second, though, this is crucial, speed. the response speed is so crucial. All your Chinese travel designers and partners are under the gun to be operating 24/7. 24/7. If our WeChat account, service account, is not operating after 6 p.m., you'd better be out of business. And when we send an inquiry out to Europe or Australia, America, we expect same time response because that's what the client expects of us. And very often my team would turn to, you wonder why there's local Chinese mafia in providing this service. It's because the Chinese providers overseas are also on WeChat and they respond in the same time and speed. And that is incredibly important.
Thanks. Oh, go ahead, Ronna.
I'll just share something from our experience in the apparel, in the branded apparel business in China. This has nothing to do with internet and, speed. It's about choosing your partners. There are a lot of very successful, locally born and grown brands in every industry. And they are very aspirational. One of the aspirations, I don't have a better word, it is to legitimize themselves by being more international, being more global, having something from the West. And that's why they would like to pair up with, Iconic's US. This is something that we did before in brands. So you can find the best, obviously, in that industry, but also someone who is really aspirational, looking for something that it doesn't have, that you have. And you're looking for something that they have that you don't have.
Thank you. Just returning for a second to what the new money is buying in China. When it comes to health and wellness products, could you all just say a little bit about what you're seeing is flying off the shelves and what is a good product to be looking to push into China?
So maybe just a general comment about that is that, and I want to use a kind of an example of a person that we've dealt with over the last 15 years. We'll call him Mr. X, okay? So Mr. X was a really, really hard-working person in the real estate business, worked hard, and 15 years ago finally scraped together enough money and got the financing to open his first hotel. And he was very, very haggard. He was very tired. At a dinner, he would smoke literally 40 cigarettes. Not all the way, but half. But in those of us that were at the table ended up smoking 20 cigarettes because he was smoking 40 cigarettes. And heavy drinking, heavy Mao Tai, and the whole rest of it. So it was always, we used to rescue each other. We say, okay, this time you do the drinking, I do the talking. Next time I do the drinking, you do the talking. So that was really the scenario. It was very, very intense, very hard, a lot of rigor, very, very fatigued people from drinking, eating, working, what have you. Now, fast forward 15 years. Oh, and by the way, in the middle, became deeply pre-diabetic, okay? Overweight, whatever. Now fast forward to today. This person still drinks, but only drinks really fine French wines in a very moderated fashion, no more cigarettes, and runs marathons, triathlons, and is very, very thin and never has to take another, statin or whatever kind of pill I think one time he told me he was taking like 11 pills. So long story short, here's the message. Health is the new wealth. That's really what it is. And the other good news is this is mandated by the government. So we can say whatever we want, but for everybody that's in this room, know it that the government is behind it. Wellness is it. So this is what we're talking about here these few days couldn't be more relevant. And people are really into it because that's as Ronna said and others said, this sophistication, this growth That's all part of it. So health is really at the forefront of everyone's psyche.
What David's talking about is the Health 2030 initiative by the government, and these are a couple of stats. There's more diabetes patients in China than anywhere else in the world. There are 11% of people have diabetes, 18% have hypertension, and about 28% have fatty liver disease. So, and it's actually accelerating because the diet of the Chinese people are also changing because of wealth. It used to be that most of the traditional diet is plant-based, but increasingly you're seeing more and more meat consumption, which is creating a lot of health problems like other developed countries. And in fact, the top 5 causes of death in China is now exactly the same as the US, which most people find also very, very surprising.
So when it comes to the health of the Chinese and also the trends coming in to be a bit healthier, which one is winning at the moment?
Well, I think completely agree with David in terms of the sense that as the wealth increases, people want to leverage, and they want part of that. The first thing they think about is actually health. So I think that's why this is highly relevant at this time of history. Like I said, it's only 6-7% of GDP spending versus like 12% in Japan and 18% in the US. It's absolutely accelerating. So the next 10, 20, 30 years is a golden period in terms of health and wellness, proliferation and growth. And that's, by the way, I used to be in the digital media business for 20 years, and I've decided to focus on health because that's the real big mega trend. So for everybody here, in the health and wellness business, China is going to be a tremendous, huge market going forward.
And especially looking at the younger generations.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I think it's across board.
Yeah, across the board.
Across all ages. Like David was talking about this lifestyle change. And before you do business deals at dinner tables over all the liquor, and now we have meetings in morning 10K runs. If you don't run, you can't run at a conversational pace. I'm sorry, the real estate deal's off. And if you go to any of the marathons in Berlin, in Chicago, the amount of Chinese runners, the growth is incredible over the past 5 years.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of consumer data will also prove that. I don't know if anyone here knows that China is actually the world's biggest market for almond. And like superfood avocado actually saw 250% growth in 1 year, just in 2017. So these are just some of the numbers, but it's just jaw-dropping enough to show you that everyone in China, I think this is like over-exaggerating statement, but people in China at different level and segment and age groups are basically jumping in to follow trend, follow health now. And with government support, definitely, we also see that there are so many different marathons happening across China every week. So people are doing different types of exercise, whether or not they are genuine for fitness or they just for the trend, but they are still doing some things, and we are seeing a lot of that now.
Great. I just want to open up now to the floors. I'm sure there's many, many questions out there. I think we only have about 10 minutes left. So is there anybody with any? Kathy?
No, I got it. What does the West get wrong about China?
I think you can probably all answer to that. Who'd like to go first?
I think we spoke a little bit about it at the beginning. I think it's a huge place, and it's very, very diverse, and you can't put it all in one bucket. It's very, very, there's a lot of, because I think for all of us, for whatever business that we're in, there's a great interest in the potential of China. Boardrooms all over the world are saying, yes, China is it, China is. But you really, what I started at the beginning to say, it's tough to be an expert. It's really just, you can be a curious observer and a curious person who engages. But in fact, it changes so quickly. And, so I think the commitment really is to study and to learn and to have a lot of, just for me, like just meeting these colleagues here on the city has been like a great and rewarding thing because everybody's perspective is very, very different. So I think you have to go there with a view of being a student and committing yourself to listening and to learning. So I think
China is a high context culture that a lot of people probably would forget that. I'll throw in an example just to illustrate that. So a few years ago, it was the Year of the Horse. So Hermes designed a limited edition bag with a horse on it. So a few years later, when it comes to the Year of the Rooster, some brands decided that, this is a very good idea. People would buy when it is Chinese New Year. So they designed a bag with a rooster on the bag. And of course, it didn't sell. And to add to that, another American fashion brand decided that they wanted to launch underwear with rooster on it. So that was like a classic example to illustrate that, we can't actually miss the cultural meaning behind. The reason that horse works, apart from it is, some like icon of Hermes, is also because horse represents prosperity, energy, and power. Roosters, on the other hand, doesn't quite mean anything like that at all. So that is an example that, to share.
by the way, I still have those rooster underwear.
You got everything that didn't sell.
They're comfortable, but...
Are you wearing them now?
I think being a student is very important. And I don't know if anybody was at the ambassador's lunch earlier. I shared some comments. I'll use one example. So my 19-year-old daughter, who's a junior in university in the U.S., she wrote a very good paper about China, Cultural Revolution, some historical stuff. And she got a very, very good grade on it, and she asked my father to read it. And my dad read it, made a lot of comments, and at the very end, he wrote, "Very good essay, but perhaps a bit too US-centric." So this illustrates our training. If we're trained in a certain environment, and especially if that environment is kind of perpetually in a leadership position, then we become very arrogant in our perspective. And that arrogance very easily flips over the line to ignorance.
Good point, yeah. Anyone else got any questions? Yes, there's one out here. Oh, Sue.
With regards to how the West thinks about China, how the West thinks about China. Being in China myself for 1 year now, I can just purely tell you that it's one of the safest countries that you can go to. Apart from the number of CCTVs they have on the road, it's really a safest country to go to.
I think so too. Yeah.
Great. Sue, you have a question? Could we have the microphone at the front? Sorry, just here. Thanks.
Thank you. It may be an obvious question, and I did have, I can't remember, 20 spas in China, I think, so a lot of experience of that. So I'm thinking about with tourism now, and I understand, and very limited knowledge, as I say. If you have a wellness destination, say in Europe or Thailand or India, I understand there's a very big female professional market looking for wellness. If you have limited marketing budget, historically one would look at Shanghai and Beijing and not secondary and tertiary cities so much. Is that still the case? And also, so on the same subject, what would you think the key issues that professional female traveler with wellness would be looking for?
Great question.
I'll try to tackle it in my limited knowledge. First, I think the working female segment who are looking for wellness experiences are actually scattered all over China. It is beyond Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen already. In Chengdu, even in Kunming, second tier. Where's that? Yangshuo. Yeah. Well, Yangshuo, okay, they have a hotel there. Lila Hotel. Yeah, but in any event, so because of the technology that Victor was talking about, news travel very fast. And secondly, I'll give you an example of what these female groups are looking for. One of my Aspen fellow, a young lady in her early 40s, very accomplished career-wise, organized a group of 10 women, raise money for charity, for children's education. So having a cause to do something was important. And then they organized 10 women from across very different fields, technology, other areas, and trained to hike up Kilimanjaro. And those were sort of the kind of signature female bonding, female friendship kind of experiences people are looking for, but with a purpose.
I guess I would try to break down the market as well, depending on the destination. So let's say if she's in Thailand or Japan or Southeast Asia, you may have a lot of people coming from second, third tier city, versus in destinations that are a little bit more unknown, like your first tier cities, maybe your immediate market. So that market is definitely moving and changing all the time, but I would also take that as a consideration as well.
Since you have a limited budget, I think I would go social marketing. But like we talk about the luxury brands, like the LVMH of the world, actually everywhere else in the world, they advertise on Elle and Vogue and places like that. But in China, they move into social marketing so much earlier because that's where they reach their target customer, because the target customer is different from the rest of the world.
And when it comes to products, are we still seeing things like skin whitening and for skincare, I mean, and streaming for yoga? Is that a big thing in China now? What kind of other things are women particularly looking for when they want to buy wellness?
So, like in terms of physical appearance, yeah, I guess the fair skin whitening product is still like trend. That's mainly because of a cultural belief that like girls with fair skin are generally more pretty. So that's like a deep-seated belief. Like again, their aesthetic value and judgment is quite different from the West, and that hasn't really changed much. However, that we also see a younger segment who would go to the gym, lift weight, they want definition, and like turn for their muscles and all that. So that we see is merging to with a kind of like a universal standard. But there are also certain like values or preferences that really hasn't changed. We also talk about men, how men like look these days. I believe like China is actually deeply influenced by Japanese and Korean culture. So you see all these gentlemen wearing makeup, using a lot of skincare products. Sometimes we can't even tell if it's a he or she on a poster. So we see that quite a lot, especially in the younger generation. Perfect timing.
Well, I think our time is up. Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for your amazing insights. Thank you.